We're live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting of the North and East Plans panel. My name is Councillor Kevin Ritchie, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Now, before we begin, following the sad death of the Duke of Edinburgh and the fact that the government's declared a national week of mourning, I think it's appropriate that we have a minute's silence to remember the Duke of Edinburgh. So if we'd all like to just pause and spare a few thoughts for a minute, I'd appreciate that. So we'll start now. Thank you, everybody, and I'm sure I speak for you all when I pass on our sincere condolences to Her Majesty the Queen and her family. So moving on, North and East Plans panel deals with applications from the north and east of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. I would like to start the meeting today by confirming that this meeting of the North and East Plans panel meets the requirements of the council's constitution, even though members of the panel are in remote attendance. While items today will be fully discussed as usual, remote attendance requires a few slight changes as to how I manage the debate. Therefore, can all attendees mute their microphone unless I invite them to speak? This will avoid disruption from background noise. Can all participants please keep their cameras on during the meeting? However, it should be noted that if there are connectivity issues and the bandwidth is low, videos will cease to be shown and will be replaced by the participants' initials. All participants will be invited to introduce themselves at the start of the public session to make it clear to public observers who will be involved in proceedings. Members wishing to ask questions or make comments should do so by using the raised hand facility, which of course is now under reactions button, I think, on most devices. When requesting your vote, I intend to systematically go around each panel member asking how they wish to vote. And I ask for your assistance and patience while I go through this process. In order to avoid any disruption to the meeting, should I lose my internet connectivity, I propose we appoint a deputy chair who could step up during my absence. And I move that Councillor Elizabeth Nash and invite another member to second that motion.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. I'll take a vote by assuming your silence as approval on this matter. I see no objectors or abstentions, so I thank you for that. Right, so I need to invite Matt Hills, our legal advisor, to speak first thing about, well, in relation to the pre-election PERDA situation we're in. Matt.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Before we start today's meeting, as members know, as a result of elections being called for the 6th of May, we currently find ourselves in the pre-election PERDA period. The Chair has asked me to advise members that the purpose of the PERDA period is not to prevent the Council carrying out its normal business, but it is to prevent the business conducted by the Council being used or having the potential to be perceived as being used to secure any electoral advantage. As such, please treat this as a normal planned panel meeting, but be mindful of debate that amounts to, or could reasonably be perceived to amount to, electioneering. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Matt. I think that's clear, and I'm sure everybody's understood that, and will be on their best behaviour as always. Okay, so I'm going to ask members and officers to introduce themselves, and please mute your microphone once you've introduced yourself. And I'll start with Councillor Anderson.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Good afternoon, Councillor David Jenkins, Kennebeck and Seacroft Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Morel Midgley, Kilpaxton Methley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Nash.
Good afternoon, Elizabeth Nash, representing Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Good afternoon, Councillor Nicole Sharp, representing the Temple Newsham Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon, Councillor Trish Smith, I represent the Pudsey Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Brooks.
Good afternoon, Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward, and I'm substituting for Gohart Almas today.
Thank you, and welcome in your substitute capacity, Councillor Brooks. Moving to officers, Jonathan.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
David Newbury.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Newbury. I'm the lead officer for the Plans Panel.
David Jones.
Afternoon, David Jones, team leader for the East team. I'll be presenting the last item.
Thank you. Jenna.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the principal planner in the North East team.
Thank you. Andrew.
Good afternoon, principal planner Andrew Perkins, sorry, and I'll be presenting the second item.
Thank you. Lisa.
Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Brannan, Principal Engineer, Highways Development Management.
Thank you. Matt, again.
Matthew Hills, Legal Advisor to this afternoon's panel. And in the event that I should lose connection, I have my colleague, Ms. Plumtree Varley, on the line who will take over.
Thank you. Debbie.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Oldham, and I'm the clerk to the panel.
Thank you. Toby.
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Senior Technical Officer, and should I lose connection, it's Max Walton who'll be backing up.
Thank you, and welcome Max and Philippa as well. Right, all present and correct. So moving on to the agenda, could I ask Debbie to go through items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there are no late items. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests?
Couple of hands raised there. So we'll take them, Councillor Midgley, Jenkins, and then Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to declare my interest as a ward member under item 9 on the agenda. I haven't been a party to any of the consultations that have taken place regarding that item, and I have approached the officers' reports with an open mind. Thank you.
Hello, I'm David Jenkins, and I wish to recuse myself from item 8 as it is a matter that on which I cannot take an impartial view, as it is a ward matter. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Trish Smith. Regarding item 9, I'd like to declare that my son is a company director for Avant Homes. It's in a different region, and we have not discussed this matter, so I am approaching it with an open mind, but I'd just like to put that on record, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, do you have any comments on those declarations? Are we happy?
Sure.
No.
Chair, may I just intervene as the Chair of Standards? At this moment in time, Councillor Smith's declaration is an other interest. After the annual general meeting, it will be a disclosable pecuniary interest.
Thanks, Councillor Nash. We do cover pecuniary and other interests during this item, really. So, but thanks for making that clear. Matt, do you have any comments? Are we happy with those?
No comments from me, Chair. Those all appear to be entirely appropriate declarations. As members will be aware, and as Councillor Midgley expressly stated, as did Councillor Smith, in situations where your interest is a non-pecuniary interest, it really is down to the individual member to decide whether they can approach today's meeting with an open mind. And Councillors Midgley and Smith have both declared that they're able to do this. Similarly, Councillor Jenkins' recusal from item 8 again would seem to be an entirely appropriate exercise of his own personal discretion. And just to touch on Councillor Nash's point, yes, there are some changes coming in, and my understanding is that this is going to be covered in members' training going forward. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, back to Debbie, and I think we're up to item 5.
We are. Thank you very much, Chair. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillor Almas, and Councillor Brooks is his substitute today.
Okay, and once again, thank you, Councillor.
That's it, thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Right, moving on to agenda item 6, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of March. So do members accept these minutes are a true and correct record? And then we'll go through matters arising after that. I see no hands, so I'll assume the silence means they are correct. So are there any matters arising? David, do you just want to talk about the email you sent? Because all members might not have seen it yet.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. It's an email which relates to page 8 of the minutes, minute 72, matters arising, and it's in connection with the planning application, listed building application for St Mary's Mount St Mary's Church in Richmond Hill. There was a couple of issues that members requested information on. One was in relation to the maintenance of the rights of way steps, as it were. Members recall those are the steep steps which lead up to the application site. And then the second issue was in respect of the ownership of the wall which forms a boundary of the site between the development site and residential properties in Richmond Hill Close. We're still investigating these matters, but the current position is that the applicant has confirmed that they will take responsibility for all matters in connection with the boundary wall between the properties of the site and Richmond Hill Close. With regard to the ownership of the steps, they don't fall within the ownership of Leeds City Council, but we're currently doing a land registry search to ascertain the actual ownership. Historic records would suggest that they belong to some.
David, you're breaking up a little bit there. I think we might have lost David. I think he'd covered that. I think a member's happy with that explanation alongside the email. So there's more information to come, basically. Is that okay? Yeah. David, are you back with us?
Yeah, sorry, it appears I dropped out of the meeting. I'm not sure if you caught everything that I said.
I think we caught enough of it, David. In addition to the email and further information to come, members seem satisfied. So
okay, thank you.
Any other matters arising, members? I see no hands. So we move on to the first substantive item, item number 7, the reserve matters application for the residential development at Leeds Road, Collingham. First of all, I think David needs to address the panel in relation to a possible deferment of this application due to some late information. So I'll pass over to David Newbury.
All right, thank you, Chair, and I shall do my best to stay with the meeting this time. Yes, as members will be aware, we're going to ask members to defer consideration of this application today, and that's in light of some further comments that we've received from the Environment Agency. I'll just run through a little bit of the context and the history. As members are aware that this is a reserved matter application which seeks approval for the detail of the design, scale, layout and landscaping for a housing development that was granted planning permission at appeal, outline planning permission at appeal back in December 2016. At that time, thinking about the Environment Agency's comments, one of the matters that was dealt with at the appeal was flooding and flood mitigation. The site, part of the wider site, floods from time to time, as do properties in the locality of the site. So the inspector, in determining the appeal, considered evidence on this, and a flood risk assessment was submitted, which included how the applicant was going to deal with the matter of flooding and flood mitigation measures, which would go some way to alleviating the problem of flooding downstream. The inspector conditioned, or the terms of the planning permission the inspector issued, dealt with those matters and required certain measures, mitigation measures, to be put in place. So that was the history, and that's where we'd got to. And to all intents and purposes, in the normal course of events, that would be the end of the matter, because the flooding issue and mitigation had already been considered. However, earlier this week, we had a representation from the Environment Agency, which did a couple of things. One, it said that we've received further, or there is now new information available, and new data available about the Collingham Beck. And this raises questions about the effectiveness of the flood mitigation measures that have been agreed at the appeal. And secondly, their advice contained the words, "There's a question mark whether this development can remain safe for its lifetime." So in light of that, the applicants then contacted us and asked for the application to be deferred. They said that they wished to address the comments from the Environment Agency, and their initial appraisal was that they would be able to introduce new measures which would help mitigate flooding. So that approach from the applicants was very much appreciated, in light that they're looking at that in a positive manner, as opposed to saying, please determine the application as submitted. But secondly, as officers, in terms of this new information, we're not clear on what, if any, implications that this will have for the development itself. We haven't had the opportunity to consult with our colleagues in flood risk management, let alone the Environment Agency and the applicants, to actually understand what the implications, what the data is, what the implications are, and what the consequences are for the form of development that members have before them. And flooding, although the measures have been agreed at appeal, it is a significant issue locally, and it's one that we would wish to resolve and present the full information to members when the application is up for determinant. As such, what we're asking members to do is, in light of that, to defer consideration of the application. Now, it might be that some members would wish to see the presentations now and hear what the local residents have to say about the application before coming to a view on that. The only points I would make in that respect is, obviously we've got a report with a recommendation before plans panel, and it's up to members to consider whether they want to defer consideration or take it forward and consider the report as it's currently presented. One of the issues there is that if you go to consider the report and comment on the application, it may not be the scheme ultimately that will come to you before you for a decision. It may be a different scheme. We simply don't know. Secondly, we're also missing a significant piece of information for members, and we can't advise you on that. And in light of those circumstances, if members were coming to a decision on the application today, there would be question marks around the safety of that decision and the robustness of that decision. So from an officer perspective, the advice that we would give to you is that the prudent way forward would be to simply defer consideration, let officers investigate this matter, come back with the full information so that we can present a comprehensive report and you'll be better informed as a result. So hopefully that's clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. I saw Councillor Anderson's hand went up very early in your report there. Do you still have a question, Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, I've not got a problem actually with what Mr. Newberry has said and explained, but I was going to justify why I would like to hear the debate today. If you look at the opening paragraph 1, there are a number of issues being raised by members there. If you then go into paragraph 4, it mentioned that this application is actually time expiring. So what's the clarity on that? That was put into a report, presumably to explain the immediacy of us needing to make a decision today. So what's the effect on that particular paragraph? And then if you go through paragraphs 25, 26, 27, 28, 32, 33, 48, and then paragraphs 104 and 111, they all raise issues that over the past few meetings, we as a committee have referred to, asked developers to go back and do further work on a number of those things. Now, if this application is time sensitive, would it not be a better idea to hear the argument, and we might then be able to give a bigger steer as to what would be needed to be put into an application when it's brought back, based on the information that Mr. Newberry gave, because they have to look at the Environment Agency information, and that way we would be able, the community would be able to express their concerns. We would then be able to say to the developer, well, can you go back and look at further at whatever issues they are? Let's not predetermine it. These are all coming from officer comments in the report, not from anything else. So I would be suggesting that maybe we should hear the debate and make further recommendations to the developers and to planners as to what we would like to see in order to get a development that would be acceptable at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, just before I bring David back in to respond to that, what we will be doing is we'll need a motion on whether to defer, so proposed and seconded, or an alternative motion. So that's what we'll be seeking after David's responded to your questions and comments, Councillor Anderson. David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I deal with the application for reserved matters first and the time-sensitive nature and respect of that. I think what that paragraph is trying to say is that this is the applicant's reserved matter application, which they submit. Sorry, let's start again. When the outline planning permission was granted, there was a time limit set on which the applicant had to submit a reserved matter application. That time limit has now submitted. So once this application is determined, the applicant will not get the opportunity to make another application for reserved matter approval. The second point, I suppose, to make on that is that at a point in time, well, the applicant has the right to appeal against non-determination. And of course, like many applicants, they've been saying to us, you've got the information in front of you, please report it to plans panel, otherwise there's a risk that we may appeal against non-determination. that's not the position we're at the current time, because the applicants themselves have recognised that there's an issue here to be addressed, and they themselves want to address it. So the risk of appeal against non-determination has gone out the window in that particular pressure at the present time. In terms of hearing the debate, I would be very cautious about that. Simply because I go back to the point, ultimately, you may have a development which is in a different form, a slightly different form. We simply don't know, and we can't advise you on that at the present time, because we don't know what the implications are that arise. Secondly, this is a report which carries a recommendation. So if you're considering a report which carries a recommendation, then there's always the opportunity for members there to come to view whether they like it or dislike the scheme and move the recommendation accordingly. So this report is not framed in such a way, for example, like a position statement, to seek members' views on particular issues. It's written with a formal recommendation at the end of it to grant reserved matter approval. So for those two reasons, I would urge significant caution to do anything but defer consideration at this particular time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that covered all your points, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Nash.
Well, I should like to move that the consideration of the report be deferred for at least another cycle. It's no point in discussing something and giving approval to something if things are to change. And I do know that flooding in Collingham is a very serious business. An acquaintance of mine who lived there nearly lost her cat. She had to be rescued before the flooding started. They did eventually get back to her property with a boat and found the cat on top of a bookcase. So the cat was rescued, but it was a very frightening situation. Now, the flood defences at the time, unfortunately, have been breached, and we want to make sure that there are adequate flood protection in this area. So I don't see any point in discussing an application which may be void in the end. So I would like to move that it be deferred.
Thank you, Councillor Nash. So we've got a proposal for deferral, and we've seeking a seconder, but I see Councillor Jenkins' hand is raised.
Yes, I would like to second that recommendation for a deferral.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a motion proposed and seconded. So I'm going to move to a vote. So to be clear, the motion is to defer this application, item 7. So if you indicate how you wish to vote out when I call your name, we'll start with Councillor Anderson.
Can I just ask a question, just for a point of clarity, will the applicants and the council go back to local councillors and local parish councils and local objectors to give them another chance to try and resolve some of their differences before this application is brought back? Or is it going to be brought back in the same format, provided the council are satisfied that the Environment Agency have not raised anything that would mean that they have to change their recommendations in any shape or form?
David, I'll allow that question to be answered for clarity before we move to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, in terms of once we've got further information in terms of the nature of the consequences that arise from the Environment Agency's comments, and if there are changes to the scheme that result from that, whether it's purely to flood mitigation measures or wider, then we'll certainly be in contact with the ward member and the parish council to discuss those. If the scheme as a result of this is significantly revised, then what we'll also do is publicise the receipt of those revisions for wider comments. So we'll keep the ward members and the parish council involved. Wider changes, then we'll go out to the local community again.
I am happy. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So, Councillor Anderson, back to the vote. You're first up.
After all that said, I will support the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Support the deferral, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Support the referral.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Support the referral, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nash.
Support deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Support, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
I support, Chair.
Thank you. And my vote is also to support the deferral. So, Debbie, I think that was unanimous, but if you'd just like to officially declare the numbers.
It was, Chair. It was 9 in favour for it to be deferred.
Thank you. So the motion has been carried. So thank you all for that. David, I don't think you need to add anything additional. I think that last point of clarification that Councillor Anderson sought probably did that. Is that fine? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we move to agenda item 8, which is the installation of a hard surface pump track for BMXs and other bicycles in Rain Park in Seacroft. Andrew's here to present the report. David asked, Councillor Jenkins, sorry, has switched off his mic, obviously, but his camera as well. So I assume if we were in the Civic Hall in room 6 and 7, he would have left the room. So he's effectively virtually left the room, which I think meets the obligations. Matt will tell me if that's wrong, if silence will do, Matt, as yeah, that's okay. So over to Andrew and the report. When you're ready, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for a pump track for bicycle use to Rain Park, Seacroft. A pump track requires people to generate momentum by going up and down jumps and mounds. This application has been brought to panel for transparency and due to the sensitivity of the proposal. Next slide, please. Members will note that this image is slightly different to the one within your pack. This has been altered to provide a better quality image. The application site relates to the southern part of Rain Park. The pump track would be located in between the 2 footpaths and the level of land falls from north to south. The track would be located to the rear of properties fronting the Rain to the west and Kentmere Approach to the east. Further to the northeast of the site, another application has been submitted for the laying out of a playground, which is still under consideration. Next slide, please. This image shows the area of the development and is taken from Kentmere Approach. This highlights the topography of the site, which is already mentioned, falls from north to south. As can be seen from this image, access to the park is provided via various A-frames, which are located to all of the entrance and exit points of the park. Parks and Countryside have confirmed that they are reviewing access to all parks across the city, but facing a dilemma between safeguarding the park for users and providing access to all. It is likely that the existing A-frames may be widened to 1 metre to allow more access for all. This has been provided for information purposes only, as the final scheme is yet to be developed. Next slide, please. This image is taken from the Rain and shows the existing multi-use games area and performance area within the far embankment. You can just see the fencing. The start of the proposed track would be located to the right of the games area. In addition, for members' information, to the top of the embankment, the end of Kentmere Crescent, there is a grey cabinet which houses a pole for a CCTV camera. This is linked to the Leeds Watch network and would provide coverage over the proposed track and existing park area. Next slide, please. This image shows the eastern boundary and again the topography of the site. The start loop would be located in front of the footpath. Next slide, please. This image shows the area next to the right, which would house the pump track and the starting loop, which then falls to the south and follows again the topography of the site. Next slide, please. This image shows how the track would be laid out, which would consist of crushed limestone and tarmac to the corners. All jumps and bumps would be within the down section of the track. All the jumps and bumps would be created via using earth, and its construction is that recommended for Olympic standard BMX bicycle tracks. The track would be located at a minimum of 20 meters from the nearest properties along the Rain, and no external lighting is provided as part of this application, which would mean that the uses would mainly take place during daylight hours, similar to the park currently. As part of the proposal, additional tree planting would be located to the east and western boundaries. Full details of this planting will be required via condition. It is acknowledged that a number of comments have been received in regards to the potential increase in antisocial behaviour and use of the track by illegal motorcycles and quads. It is considered that the nature of the track would mean that low speed and control would be required to manoeuvre the jumps, and the people using motorcycles and quads are more likely to require open, unrestricted areas for them to gain speed. Next slide, please. This image is provided to give members an idea of the sections of the track. The highest aspect would be 2 meters and located to the corner sections. Next slide, please. The following images have been provided to give members an idea of what the track would look like. These images are taken from Fernville Pump Track, which shows the bumps and corners. Next slide, please. This is another example of the corners to the track and how these are achieved and how they mitigate into the landscape. Next slide, please. Again, this image shows the jumps, which would be similar to that created along the proposed track. Next slide, please. And this is, again, another example of the bumps and jumps to the track. Next slide, please. So this slide concludes the presentation. The application is considered compliant with policy, which would provide an additional facility and use to the existing park. Approval is recommended subject to the conditions outlined at the head of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Right, we have a speaker present wishing to speak in objection to the application, and that's Miss Gaynor Edwards. So, Miss Edwards, you have 4 minutes when you're ready. If you'd just like to introduce yourself in a sentence, and then we'll start the 4 minutes when you start discussing your objections. So welcome. When you're ready, you go ahead.
Okay, my name is Gaynor Edwards, and I am a resident of the Ray. I'm an adult with no children, so I don't have children that use the park. My objection is as follows. The pump track is too big. It's too close to the housing. It is too niche and too male oriented. Obviously, girls are welcome to use the BMX track, but we all know in reality it's probably 90% boys. The trouble we have in the park already is 99% boys. I do not agree that quads, motorcycles and scooters couldn't use it, because they already get on there, and people now have these petrol motorized mini scooter things that they make themselves, and they can get through the barriers already with them, and they're on the park all the time. My main objection is the antisocial behaviour it will attract. I believe basically what will happen is an extension of what's already happening. Teens and youths gather on there, mostly boys. There's fighting, there's knives. I just believe this will attract more of that. Bikes will get stolen, fights will happen, there'll just be violence and antisocial behaviour. If you don't live here, you don't know what it's like already. The playground's a great idea. And a pump track, well, there's just one at Fernville. It's half a mile away, if that, probably a third of a mile away from Rain Park. Rain Park is a small community park. So I feel that the pump track is just too niche, will attract antisocial behaviour, male-oriented, and it will actually spoil the park. What we want on the park is families, not gangs of boys on bikes. We want young people and families on there. Park should be for everybody. And that track takes up a significant amount of the park. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Well in time. So there's now an opportunity for members to ask questions of you, Miss Edwards.
Ooh.
So I'll be asking members to raise their hands if they have any questions for you, and if you could do your best to answer them. Any questions? I see no hands. No. Okay. Well, there are no hands raised, so no questions for you. So that's your bit done now today. So I'd ask you to switch off your mic, keep listening by all means, but no further contributions from you, as tempting as it might be to challenge or query or anything. It's now for members to do that. Okay, thank you. Right, so in response, we have Dale Woodcock, who's the applicant's agent, and Victoria Nuns.
Yeah, Victoria could, well, she was trying to get here, but the fact the earlier item was adjourned, then she's obviously not going to be here in time. So I'll be okay. Hopefully to answer the questions.
So you were the main speaker anyway, Mr. Woodcock.
Yeah.
So again, you've got up to 4 minutes, and again, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And begin when you're ready.
Okay, I'm okay to share my screen. Can I share my screen? Is that okay?
Not really, no.
All right, okay. It's just
a presentation from the officers.
All right, okay. That's fine then. 2 seconds. Sorry. Right, okay. Right then. Basically, how the pump track project came about. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Provision of a pump track in Vane Park came out of the structured consultation organised by the LS14 Trust, looking at potential improvements to Vane Park. The process began in July 2019, and since then, there's been an interactive conversation with over 300 local people, young people, adults and families in the local community. The process has been open and accessible for all members of the community, and they've all been invited to have their say in the conversation about the future developments of Vane Park. Consultation events and activities included an open day at the Kentmere Community Centre, 4 sessions in Vane Park working with children and parents, 2 sessions at Bishop Young Academy, a 6-week youth cafe at the LS14 Trust building focusing on hard to reach young people, a week-long development project with 10 young people from the local community, and 4 open meetings sessions at the LS14 Trust office open to all residents. These activities were complemented by questionnaires delivered to local houses, and there was sustained support for a dirt track or pump track for the bikes. During all forms of the conversation, clear themes emerged as ideas and thoughts were collated in various groups. The community wanted the park developments to include the following aspects: sports and health, youth provision, a play area, bike track / skate park, improved infrastructure, a food offering, a focus on nature. Facilities have been proposed to start to accommodate some of these suggestions, supplementing the existing facilities and ensuring there is something for all ages. We notice a number of objectors have commented on the lack of the play facilities in Vane Park, and that a new play area should be given priority. As you mentioned earlier, well, as Andrew mentioned, there's an application currently in for the proposed play area. That includes new toddler facilities, junior play, and trim trailer equipment. Within the park, there's an existing sports pitch, mugger, fun box activities, new performance area, along with space for other activities such as walking, exercising, picnicking, and dog walking. To add the pump track would ensure there is a variety of facilities to suit all ages. The ideal location for the pump track in Vane Park was identified and the detailed design formulated through detailed discussions with the LS14 Trust and ward councillors. There was further targeted consultation about the pump track, which was undertaken by the LS14 Trust with key residents backing onto Vane Park in October 2020. The surface of the proposed pump track would be compacted gravel on the straight sections and bitmac on the corners, which is a recommended construction for Olympic standard BMX tracks. As Andrew mentioned, the pump track has been set back to a minimum 20 metres from the boundary of the nearest neighbouring properties. So that's actually the fence line, not the actual house themselves. And there's a proposed belt of trees which will screen the track from the houses. I'd just like to say a little bit about the object as antisocial behaviour. There's many documented examples of pump tracks reducing antisocial behaviour. Giving local children something to do will detract them from carrying out antisocial behaviour due to boredom. The pump track will keep the children engaged and will be good for their mental well-being. If the pump track isn't installed, then those children who could use it would most likely hang out in the new play area, making it uncomfortable for young children and their families to use those facilities. They may even take their frustration out by damaging the play equipment rather than using an almost indestructible pump track facility. As Andrew also mentioned, the security camera 416 at the end of Kentmere Crescent captured a good proportion of the proposed pump track area, including the upper area next to the mugger, which is most likely where the spectators will sit. Am I timed out?
You are. You can finish the sentence that you're on.
Okay. I think I'm pretty much...
You've finished.
Yeah,
that's fine then.
Yeah, that's fine. Andrew has mentioned the previous points.
Yeah, thank you then for that, Mr. Woodcock. So we move on to questions from members to Mr. Woodcock. So again, if you use the raised hand facility. I see no hands. Thank you again. Oh, Councillor Collins. Oh,
sorry, I couldn't find it, Chair.
All right.
Right. I just wanted some clarification regarding, if it's possible, it's might be confidential. I just wanted to know who's actually paying for the pump track, and will this remain under the responsibility of Leeds City Council? Because I assume at the moment it is a Leeds City Council park area.
Yeah, it's Parks and Countryside. There's also an application in for funding from for some cycle funding. I'd have to look into which one. Hang on, you'd have to give me a moment to look into that. Sorry, but yeah, Parks and Countryside are the main funder.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, I see no hands. So thank you. So again, Mr. Woodcock, your work is done. No further comments from yourself, but do listen to the rest of the debate, and thank you for your presentation. So members, it's over to questions to officers, and once again, please use the raised hand facility. I see Councillor Nash.
The comments from Councillor Jenkins in the report are not all that clear to me. He's made general comments in regard to the application. I'd like to know what his comments were and what are the views of the other two councillors for that area. Really, in normal times, this would have been ideal for a site visit, but we haven't got one. And I think we should rely on what the local councillors have to say about it.
Thanks, Councillor Nash. Just before that's answered by probably Andrew, I see Miss Edwards has put a comment in the chat. That's a form of communication, Miss Edwards. So we're going to disregard that comment or question, and please don't do that again. So over to Andrew to respond, please.
Thank you, Councillor. The comments from Councillor Jenkins have made, they're his direct comments, and we haven't spoken with the other ward members, but they were part of the bringing this pump track forward, which is referred to in the introduction, the proposal, sorry, under paragraph 4, where it's come to fruition after being developed by Leeds City Council Parks and Countryside in partnership with the LS14 Trust, Groundwork Leeds and local ward members for that area.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Nash? Yeah. Councillor Collins next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we were told about a very high level of consultation with residents and youngsters using the park. I just wanted confirmation from our officers, really, that that was the case, that there had been good consultation, and also whether the officers have got records of what the feedback from those consultations actually is, please.
Thank you, Councillor. There was 2 site notices posted around the park, which were to the Rain and Kentmere approach on the 19th of January 2021 this year. As part of that publicity, 32 letters of representation were received, and they've been noted under paragraph 12 of the report.
Can I come back, Chair?
You can, Councillor Collins, go ahead.
Thank you. It was more to do with the probably the independent consultations that were going on. I didn't know whether any Parks and Countryside officers were involved with that, or whether it was just the Leeds 14 group. I hope I got that right. That was doing those consultations. I mean, I support activities for young people, but it'd be nice if their actual comments were recorded somewhere. Just didn't know whether we'd got those.
So the application actually came from being developed by Parks and Countryside in partnership with the LS14 Trust, as well as ward members. So Parks and Countryside have been part of the discussion, and I think that's why the site has come forward, because they are the applicant for this development.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp next.
Thanks, Chair. Andrew, you said that all access points were A-frame. I was just wondering what consideration had been given to emergency services? Just in relation to, you know, sort of ambulance-wise?
Yeah. I have actually referred to that within the report.
Oh, have you, sorry?
No, it's okay. There's a few locked barriers, which are from, I think, Kentmere approach, where you could get vehicular access in if need be, and the A-frames are very close to the pump track. So if there was an emergency, an ambulance could park on the road and still gain access over the barrier and access the pump track for any casualties or anything.
Okay, thanks for that. There is, on page 24, there's a gate next to 2 A-frames, which I think is would be at the bottom end of the site proposed. Page 24 of your presentation pack that councillors have received. Any more questions? Councillor Sharp, your hand's still up. Is that from the previous one?
It is, yes, sorry, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Nash.
Sorry, I was looking at the plan, and this red boundary, what does the red boundary denote? I can see that the track is entirely within the red boundary, although it does appear to cross public footpaths. Could you comment, please?
Toby, are you just okay to pull that slide up?
Yeah.
Which Councillor Nash is referring to, please? Where, sorry, Councillor Nash, whereabouts is the red boundary that you're referring to?
I'm looking at the one that's in the pack that was sent with the agenda. I don't understand why the red boundary.
There was originally a red boundary around the site, which was just to annotate that the track was at least 20 metres from the rear properties, from the boundaries of the rear properties. But that did get amended, and the current proposal layout is there. And
There was a slide. There it is. Yeah.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that's just showing the location of the location plan of the site. So it's just showing where the development would be within the park, that it doesn't include the rest of the park, the track.
Chair, if you don't mind, I could potentially help on this. I think the reason why the red line boundary goes beyond the footpaths, which is where the extent of the track is confined within them, it's just incorporating areas where there's going to be some landscape planting. So the landscaping's identified beyond those footpaths. So I think that's why it's a slightly strange red line boundary compared to where the actual track is.
Okay, right, it is strange, and there was no explanation with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to be clear then, it doesn't cross any public footpaths before I bring Councillor Midgley in?
No, that's correct, Chair. It's located between the two footpaths.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Edwards raised some concerns regarding potential antisocial behaviour, and I think that was also mentioned in some of the comments. One of the consultation responses with West Yorkshire Police, they haven't mentioned anything about potential or current antisocial behaviour in the park. They make reference to a couple of recommendations. So I just wondered if there was anything, whether the police had made any comments about it, or whether they thought there'd be any problems. It may increase antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. West Yorkshire Police were quite supportive of the scheme because it deters people from carrying out antisocial behaviour, because there's something for them to do, something for them to use, and something to take pride in. And as part of the consultation for the application, they have discussed with local children and teenagers to gain their views on the track and what they would like to see. Another comment from West Yorkshire Police is in regard to the antisocial behaviour to do with the CCTV network, and that is at the end of Kentmere Approach. So as I said in the presentation, there would be surveillance over the track to deter in terms of any antisocial behaviour that would arise, but it wouldn't be expected that that should be produced by this scheme, and it should hopefully reduce that within the area.
Thank you. Can I just come in on a point, please, Chair?
Absolutely. Keep going, Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I'm sorry if I missed it, but was the is the camera a new camera then? It wasn't in place previously?
No, it's been in place since 2016, I think the application was, and that's been positioned at the end of Kentmere Approach, so it does have a good surveillance over the park and where the proposed track would be.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Miss Edwards, I'm sorry, but I did explain quite clearly that your time is done in this contribution to this debate and discussion. You had your opportunity in your 4 minutes. They're the council protocols for plans panel presentation. So it's down to members now to ask appropriate questions, which they are doing. We always give a thorough and robust analysis of the reports and questioning, and that's been played out here, I think, transparently to all who are watching. So I just ask again that you please let us get on with the business. So Councillor Smith next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, this will obviously be open and free for all to use. I wondered if there were any plans to expand on that and maybe build on the children, building their own bikes or anything like that, to really give them some ownership, and that should hopefully then help with the potential of any ASB. I just wondered if that had been thought about, please.
Thank you, Councillor. As part of the consultation, they have gone in partnership with the LS14 Trust, and there's young people and teenagers within that, and that's to gain their views, so they do have some ownership, and they are proud of it, and they then hopefully will take good care of it and use it in that way.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I see no raised hands. So there's nothing from me. I think they've covered, members have covered anything I may have brought up, so thank you. So we're on to comments. So again, just if you want to express your views, your thinking on this, and then we'll see if somebody wants to pass a motion, either recommendation or an alternative motion. So I'll await hands for comments. And I see Councillor Brooks first up.
Thank you, Chair. Though I can understand the objectors' concerns regarding the potential for increased antisocial behaviour, certainly if teenagers do have more things to occupy themselves with, and we know that in my own ward, Little London and Woodhouse ward, they don't tend to have as much. Well, they don't tend to, be as naughty, let's say. So I think that this application has a lot to recommend it. I do understand the concerns regarding noise and things like that, but at the end of the day, green spaces should be for everybody, including younger people in our community. So I think I'm quite happy to support this recommendation. I've listened very carefully to the objections and to the discussion. I'm quite happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, we'll won't take that, if you don't mind, as a moving yet. I do like to let members have their full comments before we move a motion, if that's okay, Councillor Brooks. So just to clarify, you're not formally moving it at this point, are you?
That's fine, Chair. That's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, regarding my previous comment, I've actually got pages 23 to 26 missing out of my application pack. So sorry about that. I like this this application, and I think that it covers the application that's made about the play area for all ages as well. If it covers all ages, boys and girls, in terms of the BMXing, and I think it's needed in Seacroft. So I like it.
Thank you. Any more comments? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I like this. I think anything that channels youth energy gets my vote, in fairness. I understand the applicant's objections and concerns regarding antisocial behaviour. I think the children do tend to gather when they've nothing to do. But if they do have something to do, something they can be proud of and something they can buy into, then hopefully that won't be the case here. So I do think it's a good proposal, and I do understand the objectors' concerns, but hopefully they won't come to pass.
Thank you, Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to say that I welcome this sort of activity for the older youngsters, the younger teenagers, even down to around the 20-year-olds. I think they get missed out an awful lot. Children's playgrounds are great for the toddlers and those under about 8. But this is for the older group of youngsters, so I'm fully supportive. Just regarding the lady who objected, it's interesting about the question as to whether girls will use it. We've recently had a skate park commissioned and installed in Horsforth. A lot of people there thought that the boys would dominate, but we do have a lot of girls using it. And believe me, the girls can stand their own against the young blokes as well. So it's probably something that all ages and both sexes can actually enjoy. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But I think it will be a very positive thing for the community.
Thank you. I can see no further hands, so just a couple of comments from me and my thoughts. I too would support this. I think paragraphs 28, 29 and 30 about the policy how it meets policy on health and improving green spaces are important. Again, I understand the concerns of Miss Edwards and the other objectors in terms of ASB, but I think it's incumbent of the police to deal with those issues. The fact that there's a CCTV camera in the area is helpful towards that. Agree, and it's good to hear the experience that you're finding in Horsforth about girls using the facility, and hopefully that's something the LS Trust will work with girls in the area as well to develop that. One thing I would ask is that we expedite the review on access, because there may be other access points to the park, but as things stand, if they don't have a key for that barrier, people are excluded from enjoying that park, which needs to be rectified as soon as possible, in my opinion. So with that, I'll go back to Councillor Brooks, who indicated she was going to move a motion.
Yes, can I move a motion to in support of the recommendation, please, Chair?
Thank you very much. Councillor Collins.
I'd like to second, Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion proposed. That's the officer recommendation. I'm just checking what page that's laid out on. Yeah, page 45. It's seconded, so we move to a vote. I don't think there's anything to sum up there by the officers, so we'll move straight on to the vote. Councillor Anderson.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Jenkins. Oh, sorry, he's not here. He's reclused. Councillor Midgley.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nash.
In favour.
Councillor Sharp.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you as well. And Councillor Smith.
In favour, Chair, thank you.
And I'm also voting in favour. So, Debbie, again, I think we know what the result is, but if you could just announce the numbers.
Chair, it's John Grieve. Debbie's had to leave the call. In terms of numbers, 8 members in favour of the motion.
Okay, thanks, John. I hope Debbie's okay, but thanks for stepping in. Hopefully it's just a connection issue. Right then, so the motion's been carried, permission subject to the conditions that were specified on page 45. So thank you again. I don't think there's anything for the officers to summarise there. Okay. Now, do we want a short 5-minute break before we go on to item 9, or do members want to crack on? Shall we take 5 minutes? 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 1:15, just a short break, perhaps just refresh your glasses and etc. And then we'll be back at 1:15 to resume the meeting with item 9. Okay, thanks everybody. Just knock off your videos and your mics that are already off out. Right, it's about quarter now, so are we, John, if you keep an eye on members returning.
I'm back, Councillor Ritchie.
Oh, hi, Debbie, you're right.
Hiya,
Hope all's
yeah.
all well.
Yeah.
All right.
Could members turn their cameras on when they're in, please, and we can check to make sure they're okay. All members are back now, Councillor Ritchie.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Okay, welcome back, everybody. And so we move on to agenda item 9, which is the reserve matters approval for now 150 dwellings off Church Lane, Micklefield, Leeds. And David Jones is going to present the application when you're ready, David.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall this from the March meeting, where at the time it was 163 units. There was some concern about density and essentially just too many units on the development. So the application was deferred for further consideration of those matters. Essentially, there's quite a short report really that just deals with those issues. And equally, the presentation's quite short in that respect. In the background, the original report is there, as is the presentation, but hopefully just focusing on the issue for deferral is fine by members. We just move to the next slide, please, Toby. So that's just a reminder of the site we're dealing with, really, and it's the reserve matters application. Next slide, please. So this is the revised layout. It is a bit of spot the difference because basically the layout itself has not altered, and it's essentially there's just 13 units less within the overall layout. So to aid members, just to do some comparisons, I've sort of enlarged some areas, but effectively that's the revised layout. And I do have a couple of updates for the report that I'll run through at the appropriate time. So next slide, please. So this is just a revised street scenes in terms of, these are the same street scenes in terms of position that members saw last time. And if we just move to the next slide, please, I've got the comparisons. So this is the Church Lane frontage. And I guess the thing to note there is it's the same broad layout because they're quite well spaced, those particular properties. But there was comment at the last meeting about, well, chimneys, if you were going to put chimneys on anywhere, they should at least be along the Church Lane frontage. So they've responded to that. The revised one is at the bottom. Next slide, please, Toby. So again, the March presentation is the top and the revised one the bottom. So you can just see there that it's a bit more relaxed in terms of a particular house type has been changed to a detached rather than it being a semi-detached. And that's an example of the changes that have been made throughout. Next slide, please. And this is, again, just another example of those sections. And again, you can just pick up from the bottom one where there was a line of 6 originally, that's now been reduced to 5. So they've just got a bit more space around them. Next slide, please. So just focusing in on this particular slide, because there are a few changes. It's difficult to describe when you can't point, but this is probably the time to come in with the update as well. Obviously, off the back of the revised plans and particularly responding to some of the comments at the March panel about, I think raised by Councillor Lewis, we have sought to reconsult. So in terms of timescales for comments, new site notices have gone up and the parish council and the ward members have been consulted. And the expiry date we gave for them was essentially today, which is the full normal 14 days. I've had acknowledgement back from Councillor Lewis, just acknowledging the revised plans, no formal comments made. And Ward Councillor Harland was actually referenced in that email acknowledgement. And the parish council have responded this morning also. Their opening line is that very positive changes have been made, so they're pleased with them. And they have flagged a particular issue though, and while these slides are up, it's worth just running through them. And it relates to the link from the application site into Churchville Terrace, which is to the north. So when looking on those plans, it's where it's number 27. Hopefully you can see that. So if you see the left-hand side is the March panel, and then the right-hand side is the revised one. And what's happened is that path has just slid along a little bit to the east, and what needs to happen actually is it needs to move back to the west, because number 27, who's written in again, objecting and flagging a particular issue about, doesn't want that link to be utilising his existing driveway. And actually that's something that members don't, officers, we don't want either. So there's a slight omission there in terms of that particular change. So that does link into the recommendation. It's currently down as a defer and delegate subject to no substantive new issues being raised. We would just like to add to that we would like to receive revised plans that basically push that footpath back to where it was. In terms of the impact and implications of doing that, it's quite straightforward, because it's along that stretch where some of the units have been lost. So everything can just shuffle along quite easily, and there shouldn't be any more adverse impact, or sorry, more impact on the neighbours than the current scheme. It would literally be a case of those properties just moving along slightly. So there is a change there to the officer recommendation to pick up on that particular point that's been flagged by both the parish council and that immediate neighbour. But hopefully you can see within those two comparison plans where the units have been lost. And again, it just gives a bit more of a relaxed layout. Next slide, please, Toby. So same situation, March scheme on the left, new scheme on the right. And again, it's just, so this is further along to the west along the same road, basically the top road. So you'll be able to pick out, for example, there's a semi-detached house has been replaced with a detached house. So again, there's just a bit more room there now. So that will allow the change that I've already mentioned in terms of that footpath cycle route link to be provided. Next slide, please. And this particular slide just picks up on that change that was shown on one of the street scenes. So you can see the line of 6 properties originally, and now that's down to 5. Sorry, it was 7 originally, and now it's down to 6. In terms of other changes, can we move to the next slide, please? It's essentially just the house types that have now got chimneys. So it's effectively exactly the same internally. These are just the elevations of that particular house type with a chimney. And there's 3 of them. So next slide, please. Again, chimney added, and next slide. Yep. And next slide, please. So essentially, from our appraisal of the revisions, you'll see that the mix changes slightly, but it still falls within the range. The density is kind of on the button now as to what you would expect, so it's down to 30, but policy H3 does say that that's an appropriate density. There's still an over provision of accessible units. The affordable housing has understandably reduced, but by 2 units, but there's no conflict with the policy requirements. And obviously we've now got some chimneys added. And a consequence of the changes is there's also 13 units less relying on essentially the same green space areas. So there was an over provision before, and that has obviously just been magnified through these changes. So essentially it's still recommended for approval, just subject to that extra caveat that we do need to see a revised plan that just shuffles everything along a little bit to make sure that that footpath cycle route links in properly with the route to the north. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Chair, there was one last thing. There's the sill figure, and it's just for information, has been reduced obviously off the back of the reduction in numbers, and that's £835,339.34. So it's come down by about 52,500 pound relative to before. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. And just before we move on to questions, I'd just like to welcome that summary sheet in Appendix 1. I think that's really helpful, clear and concise. So good work. Right, so we have no speakers for this application this time around. So it's questions to officers. So the usual format, if you'd like to use the raised hands facility, I will bring you in. And it's Councillor Midgley first.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really a question about the consultation period. So if I'm right in thinking the consultation period expires this evening, and if that's the case, if there's any further comments raised or concerns by residents, would they be fed back to us for further comment or discussion? Thank you.
In terms of the recommendation, we've tried to encapsulate there that essentially if anybody raises a new issue that's substantive in nature that we've kind of not heard before, there would be a need to report that back to Plans Panel. We're not really expecting anything because of the nature of the changes that have been undertaken, and indeed the comments that have been received are very specific to that footpath link, which I've already mentioned. So if we do receive anything substantive, raising new issues, yes, we'll report that back to members, but we're not expecting to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks, then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the affordable housing provision. So it says that it's a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom property. So my first question is how many of each bedroom properties will be included in the affordable? And also just querying why the 4 bedroom hasn't been included in that mix.
Okay. In terms of, there was a bit of discussion about this at the March meeting in terms of the specific mix, and that was partly off the back of the applicants being in discussions with a provider, and that's the feedback they've got from that particular provider in terms of local need, and that it was more towards the 2 and the 3 bedrooms. In terms of the actual mix, it should be, I can't quite see it at this scale, It's on the plans in terms of in the key. I'm just trying to get a larger copy that I can look at. But the units that have been lost from the scheme were largely 3 bedrooms. So I suspect the 2 units less are now were going to be 3 bedrooms. But I'll just try and bring that up. I don't know what size members get in terms of the plans, whether they can read that on their own papers.
It's not on the screen. Were you expecting?
I might be able to help actually, Chair, because I've got a larger copy of the plan. So they're going to be, in terms of affordable housing, 2 number 1 bed, 2 person ground floor apartments, 2 number 1 bed, 2 person first floor apartments, 13 2 bed, 3 person dwellings, and 6 3 bed, 4 person dwellings. So it's 6 3-bed houses, 13 2-bed houses, 2 1-bed apartments, or well, actually it works out at 4 1-bed apartments.
And that reflects the housing need. Sorry, Chair.
It's all right. Yeah, follow-up questions are fine. Just go ahead.
Yeah, essentially that's the discussion that the applicant has had with the registered provider. So we've not sought to necessarily challenge that on the basis that the registered provider is obviously seeking to provide those within the local area based on local need.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that wasn't one of the points that the ward members challenged at all when that was expressed either in the report or verbally at the meeting about that analysis from the registered provider. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at conditions 3 and 4. The removal of the permitted development rights of plots 109 to 127. I can't identify where they are and if they are all affordable homes or whether they're in with the general mix. I understand why you've done it, because obviously we've taken out the density, so we don't want the density to go back in. But I'd just like to see where they are, please, and I'd like to understand whether they are the affordable homes or not as well, please.
Okay, thank you. They're essentially, if we could maybe go to the layout plan, Toby. Yeah, that's fine. So essentially, they're all the houses along the bottom of the site, which is along the southern boundary. They're all private, and they're all the ones with the gardens that back onto the footpath that's just off site. And the reason for that is explained, I guess, in the original officer report. But there's basically those gardens, although they're big enough in terms of size, they're quite short in terms of overall garden depth. But we felt that was appropriate because there's a southerly aspect and they weren't too small. So essentially, is all we're doing is saying, if anyone wants to extend out the back of their house, as often many people do, we'd like to see those rather than them just be allowed to do that under permitted development. And we would then come to a view on each application on its own merits. And part of the consideration would be about how big the extensions are relative to garden depth, for example. So none of them are affordable units though.
All right, thank you very much, thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, so we move on to comments. Any comments from members and how you're feeling about the application? Oh, actually, there is a question from me. Remiss of me to forget my own question. Just on the footpath, are we going to need to add a condition to the recommendation?
Is this relating to the needing to line up with that footpath, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think how we'd look to resolve that is we need to see a plan. So we'd include that as part of the reason for the defer and delegate, subject to receiving a satisfactory revised plan aligning the footpath link correctly.
Right. So the recommendation would be slightly modified with that additional sentence.
It would, yes, Chair.
Thank you. So that's me done with questions. Councillor Nash first, I think.
Well, I'm very pleased that the developers have agreed to what the committee requested. This is in the SAP for 150 dwellings, and we've now got that. I don't think we can ask any more at this point. And when everybody else has had their say, I should like to move that it be accepted.
Thanks, Councillor Nash. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say thank you to the developers and the planners as well. I'm sure you've had a big hand in getting this to be a more acceptable development for the whole community. I think it looks a lot better with the chimneys on the front, and I do think that the more spatial awareness there is now is better. I think it's a much improved plan. I like it.
Thank you. Any more comments? I see no comments. Just a quick comment from me. I think it's actually well done to the members, or most of the members on this panel. I actually would have voted to accept what we had before us. However, the slight downside is we lose 2 affordable units and 50k in SIL. However, it's what the members wanted and what this committee wanted. So well done on everybody who's helped to contribute to this outcome. So we need a recommendation, a motion moving. So I think that was Councillor Nash who indicated her intention to do that. Do you want to formally move it, Councillor Nash? You're just muted. Sorry, Councillor Nash, you're muted.
I did click, but it didn't click. I'd like to move the recommendation to defer and delegate reserve matters approval to the Chief Planning Officer.
With the additional line about the footpath?
Yes.
Well, you don't need to remember it, but
no, I do remember it, and I should have made a comment at the time. At the moment, the footpath is straight to the owner of number 27 Private Drive, and it needs, we were told, moving to the west. Actually, I think that as this is quite a big garden at that end of that house, there's no reason why it can't be as it is now, but turn left in a kind of a little L shape. But I'll leave that to the officers to work out.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. So we will vote on the motion as proposed and seconded, which I don't think I need to repeat. As Councillor Nash's comments about the orientation of the path will be picked up under that extra line under the deferral reason. So, Councillor Anderson first.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nash.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Approved, Chair.
And Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also vote to approve the recommendation. So again, Debbie, if you just announce the numbers for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. That was 9 in favour of the recommendations by officers to defer and delegate.
Okay, I don't think, David, you may, anything to add? I think
I think it's very clear. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, everybody, thanks for that. That concludes today's meeting. The next meeting is on the 27th of May at 1:30. But just before we leave, as it's the end of term, as it were, if you'd just indulge me in a few thanks. First of all, thanks to you members for your contributions throughout the year. As ever, thoughtful, incisive contributions. I think we always give a thorough, fair and open-minded analysis of of the reports and our approach to the debate. Thanks to the officers. First of all, those in the background perhaps, and the admin officers who've worked really hard, in particular this year, with the remote meetings. I know lots of work goes on behind the scenes and lots more that I don't know about to deliver these remote panels. So thank you to those. Thanks to the planning officers and the technical officers, such as Lisa from Transport and what have you, for their professionalism and contributions. And just a thanks to Adam Ward, who's moving to South and West, and a welcome to Ryan Platten, who's taking over that lead role on this panel. And finally, and thanks to legal as well for their wise advice and keeping us on the straight and narrow, as it were. And finally, a big thanks to the group manager, David, who obviously I have a lot of contact with between panels. Your support and your expertise has been valued, and I continue to learn a great deal from you. So with that, we don't know who'll be on this panel in the new term, but I wish everybody well. And well, we may see you back in May, or we may not. But all the best to you. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see. I'll certainly be still a councillor, so see you the other side, as it were. All right. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Turn
Bye-bye.
off
Thanks,
you
Chair.
turn off the webcast, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for those kind words.
Oh, right, no worries. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
That okay, David?
Yeah, no, that was good. Yeah, it was nice
Cool.
to Chair to say those thanks.
It
wasn't
was, yeah. We
Yeah.
don't often get that.
No, no.
We're still live, guys. Can you just keep it down or so? Meeting's still live, so I think it's probably best if we just leave the meeting.